Hey, what's up everyone? It's Hoyle here. Today we're going to be talking about the trifecta: aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. These three components work together to help you control one of the most important parts of your shot, and that's lighting. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the According to Hoyle channel to stay up to date on all of our latest videos. But without further ado, see you on the other side of the intro. Alright, so what is aperture? Well, aperture refers to the opening of a lens's diaphragm through which light passes. It is calibrated in f-stops and is generally written as numbers such as 1.4, 2, 2.8, 4, 5.6, 8, 11, and 16. Lower f-stops give more exposure because they represent larger apertures, while the higher f-stops give less exposure because they represent smaller apertures. Okay, so let me break it down for you. What did all those big fancy words really mean? Well, think of your lens like you would a human eye. In a lot of ways, both operate the same way. For example, the iris in your eye shrinks or grows larger based on the amount of light coming into said eye. This also affects your depth of field. The same thing also happens with your camera lens, but instead of an iris doing all the work, the lens have blades that open and close based on your f-stop. Pretty much, the higher the f-stop, the more the blades are covering up the inside of the lens and blocking the light. Aperture is also what you control when you want to blur your background. For example, taking a portrait of someone, the way to do that is you drop your f-stop down, and if you did this correctly, the object should still be in focus and your background is nice and blurry. Keep in mind though that you would have a lot of light coming into your shot, so you might be overexposed, so you'll have to adjust the other two settings. In video, for example, you'd want to do this blurred background to allow your audience to focus on whomever is talking. And what if you wanted both the background and the foreground in focus? Well, you would step up your f-stop to bring both into focus. Just keep in mind, your shot's going to be extremely dark, and now you're going to have to adjust the other 2 points of the triangle to light it up. So next we're going to be moving on to ISO. How much light is needed is determined by the sensitivity of the medium used. That was as true for glass plates, as it is for film, and now digital sensors. Okay, so what does exactly that mean? Well, history lesson time. In the past, when we used film cameras, for example, the way we would adjust ISO would be by switching out the different films that, depending on the ISO, were more or less sensitive to light. It was literally how the film was made. So you would have to switch out your film for film that was very sensitive to light if you were shooting in dark scenes. Conversely, if you were shooting in midday, your film would have to be less sensitive to light and would have a lower ISO number. Pretty much, though, what you just need to remember, the higher the number, the more sensitive to light. Got it? Good. History lesson is over. So now how does this work with digital cameras, since that's what most of us use today? Well, it works pretty much the same way. However, instead of having to spend a bunch of time switching out film, we just do it digitally in a setting. In the settings, you can actually adjust the sensitivity of your camera's sensor. And again, the higher the number, the more the light is going to be in your shot. But please remember, your shot will start to degrade the more you increase your ISO. What I mean by that is you'll start to get artifacts in it and you'll lose resolution and will start to be blurry. So just keep that in mind, guys. Finally, you have shutter speed. Shutter speed is how the eye closes taking a picture. The slower the shutter speed, the longer the eye is open, which means more light will be able to enter into the sensor. Great, you're telling yourself. I'll just leave the shutter speed low and I'm good to go, right? Well, you'll be wrong. Low shutter speed is great if your subject isn't moving. What about someone that's running on the basketball court? Well, you're going to have to increase your shutter speed. If you don't, your player is going to be all blurry in your shot. So you have to go in, adjust your shutter speed up to something extremely fast, and you'll be able to get that perfect still shot of the player. However, there's a downside to everything. Now your sensor isn't getting a lot of light because the eye is closing super fast. So you'll need to go back in and adjust either your ISO or your aperture to compensate for the lack of light. Okay, so that's the basics on the trifecta for lighting. You got ISO, aperture, shutter speed. So now, with photography and video, they almost work exactly the same way. However, the only thing you need to know and be aware of for video is that shutter speed is directly linked to another setting called FPS. Now, if you play video games at all, then you know what I'm talking about. It's called frames per second. And it probably sounds familiar. Pretty much the higher the FPS, the less chop you're going to get in your video, and it's going to be extremely smooth. For example, you move your hand in front of the camera really, really fast, like I'm doing. At a lower FPS, the hand will be blurry, just like it would be in the real world. The higher the FPS, the less blurry the movement's going to be. Now, there are different standards of FPS that we use, and you should make note of these because depending on what type of video you're going to want to make, you want to adjust your FPS to kind of give it that type of feel. So, for example, filming cinematic, the standard is 23.987 FPS, or most cameras just say 24, which we have come accustomed to as being the cinematic FPS for all films. And that includes any of the videos that I'm filming and you're watching today. I film at 23.987. Now, most news broadcasts and soap operas included are filmed at around 30 frames per second. The higher FPS ranges are mostly, honestly, used for action shots. The biggest ones that I can think of off the top of my head would be the Red Bull competitions that you see, like the people skydiving out of planes and then jumping like while they're in midair back into the plane with Red Bull suits on. Those are all shot at extremely high FPS cameras. Anyways, FPS and shutter speed is directly related for video. What you need to know is that whatever your FPS is, you need to make sure you double your shutter speed. So for example, I'm filming at 23.987. I need to make sure that my shutter speed is at least a 140 or 148. For example, right now I'm filming at a 150 with an aperture of 5.0. So anyways, you need to make sure that your shutter speed is at least double your FPS. If you don't do that, for example, your shot will become all blurry when your object moves around and it's going to get all distorted. Like I said in my white balance video, sometimes you want some of those errors to show up. You want the distortion because maybe in your scene, for example, your main character received a concussion on the football field. You cut to a point of view and then you can see the camera kind of stumble up as it's the actor getting up and it's all blurry and twisted and distorted as things are moving on. And it's letting your audience know that, hey, this person might have a concussion. So just keep that in mind for some artistic flair. However, most of the time you guys won't be doing something like that. So if you're not, make sure to double your shutter speed. So if I'm shooting at a 34 frames per second, then make sure that your shutter speed is a 148 or higher. So just keep that in mind. Anyways, that's all for the trifecta of lighting. Till next time, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. See ya.